So I am delighted to be here, and I have to tell you, it's a marked difference from the last time I hung out with the folks from Climate Solutions back in December, which was right after the election. And oh my gosh, you guys were, I mean, everybody was reeling with the election, and believe me, I get it. Hold on a second, this is totally gonna fall. So let me fix this before an accident happens. Okay, that's better. But yeah, it was kind of interesting because people were totally reeling from the election, and I totally get that. But you know, it kind of reminded me a little bit of this Saturday Night Live episode. You know, right after the election, they were doing an election night party, and and it was, you know, started off euphoric, and then all of a sudden they realized Hillary was going to lose, and it was mostly white people at the party, and then there were these two black guys. And all the white people are sobbing and crying like, oh my God, it's the worst thing that's ever happened to America. And the Chris Rock and the other black guy was like, really? It's the worst thing that happened to America? Come on. I mean, if they had like a black guy and a First Nations guy, it would have been over. But anyway, it was just kind of like, guys, instead of, let's take this as an opportunity to realize that, you know, life is going to go on. If anything, let it galvanize us to realize that there's work that we really need to be doing after it goes on. And also, when you really stop and kind of look at it, think about that Trump is actually doing something that does remind people of fascism, and I get it, and there's some real stuff there. But also, think about what Hitler did when he attacked both Britain and Russia at the same time. He kind of spread himself a bit thin, and they made all sorts of enemies, which could then become friends and allies in other ways. And that, I think, is something that we're going to have to start thinking to do in very real ways as we're thinking about climate solution going forward. Like, the enemy of my enemy is my friend, straight up. And we can't continue, you can't do this kind of slash and burn thing that he's been continuing to do and not expect for it to fall flat down at some way, shape, or form. And if I could quote the hip-hop sage Tupac, get my weight up with my hate and pay him back when I'm bigger. That's what we need to be doing. And so with that said, you know, so much of my work really has been about how do you find out what are the things that need to be done to pay them back when you're bigger. It is about creating, you know, looking at what is the need, what's the market need, how are folks going to actually come to you, you know, because they feel as though their needs are being met. Do you have an attractive solution that's going to provide what they're looking for, what they're dreaming about? And once you find out what it is they're dreaming about and what kind of wish you're going to make come true, then you do need to find what is the angel investment. And believe me, the angel investment isn't always money, often it is. But often it could just be, are your supporters behind you? That's also an angel. Then you have to do something that is different from what was there before. You have to launch a beta version. And the same thing goes when you refine you have to learn from the mistakes. You don't just look and go, oh, look what wonderful work I've done. How do I need to change it? Because people will tell you when things need to change. And then you have to reiterate and expand the model. So with all the work that I've done, this is the model that we went through. And it goes straight from the fact that, you know, I'm from a neighborhood where there were a lot more environmental burdens than there were environmental benefits. And we really did have to come and figure out ways that created the kind of health and well-being so that people would actually learn to care about where we are. And I think that as we are thinking about the future of climate solutions in our country, you know, are we talking to people in ways that actually make them feel like we're listening to them? I mean, because that is one of the reasons why Trump won. People felt like, despite 8 years of Obama, that their needs weren't being met, that they weren't being listened to. You know, many of the same folks that voted for Obama voted for Trump. So we know that that wasn't necessarily, you know, wasn't really always a race thing. It was like a quality of life thing. As is my quality of life getting better? And we have to recognize that we need to think about that going forward. So, you know, for the work that we did, we knew that we were under attack by our city and state administrators about what they looked at our community as, which is a repository for most of the waste that wealthier and wider communities in New York City and New York State could afford to avoid. So here we were, a politically marginalized community, and we really had to come up with a way to make people care about actually advocating in their own self-interest. And one of those ways was actually helping them think about looking at their land as something that would be supportive of them. So we worked really hard to transform this dump into what became a national award-winning park. And it started, the beta version was literally just, getting rid of the garbage that was there, actually covering it over with wood chips so that we could become sort of like a safe place for people to be in. But then we realized that despite that, and we grew some willow trees and things of that nature, what we realized was that we needed a lot more. So our beta version we learned from it, and we realized we needed to see programming happen at that park. And even at that beta level. Doing that kind of programming then made us ready to participate for the big bucks. And this was us at the day of the groundbreaking for a $3 million restoration. And I do love this picture because I love the pose. But creating that was just how do we get to that point? And only then were we ready to just take it from there to this. And so this is Hunts Point Riverside Park as it exists right now, and really provides that literal kind of stepping stone for where people can see themselves as an active part, of an environmental solution in their own community. Like having a place this beautiful was something that no one really expected to see, and it actually did help us realize that we could also use that kind of power in our own sense of self, and use it as a way to kind of create more for our own community and be better advocates on our own behalf. Oh yeah, and I even use it as a place for, I got married back almost 11 years ago at this point. But using that also as another opportunity to think about, if this was our community, and we as a poor community of color, often isolated from the rest of the city, socially, but in some ways physically. So we realized that the issue there, if we're going to look at how do we make sure that the rest of our city, the rest of our country knows that as a poor community of color, as a low status community, that we actually are a part of it. Well, like a really, I think, startling example was the East Coast Greenway, which was literally just a greenway system that goes all the way from Maine down to Miami. And what we were looking at was that when the Greenway went through New York City, it would literally make a beeline around the South Bronx. It just didn't come anywhere near us. And we were like, could that be any more obvious? It's like, we are not a part of you. You're like, you don't even see us as a part of you. But we knew that actually creating greenways could provide economic development opportunities, stormwater management opportunities, air quality cleansing, and of course, building community pride. So we wanted to be a part of that system. And so the solution for us was to literally, I wrote a proposal to come up with $1.5 million from the Federal Highway Administration to design a South Bronx Greenway, on water, on street, bike path. Because we had that little angel investment that was done, that little piece, that plan, once it was done, literally put us at a point where we could create new opportunities there. Those little street things, those little medians in the middle, they were the beta version, because we articulated that we needed traffic calming, that we needed stormwater management, that we needed all this stuff, and we were able to get those as a very beta version in there. But later on, we realized that through the development of the Greenway, which was then able to raise about $50 million, we were able to do stuff like that, which actually provided a stormwater management benefit for the city as well. All this green infrastructure are things that we wanted to see happen more of, within our city. But again, all of these type of things also created the jobs that we wanted to see happening, green jobs that we wanted to see happening within our local community too. And this is one of my favorite parts, because the South Bronx was separated only by about 25 feet of water from one of New York City's coolest parks called Randall's Island. And once this pathway was complete, and this was me literally about to jog my first time through to Randall's Island, this little piece actually made us a part of the Greenway. So again, now the Greenway map does include us here, which is the South Bronx Greenway, finally, decades later. Creating real opportunities for people to feel like they are a part of the environment, that they are a part of the environmental equality of our country, that they're a part of the environmental movement. A lot of folks, especially in low status communities, don't feel that way. Many of them feel like it's a white thing, not even a white thing, but a rich white thing. And so that is part of our job as people who actually are interested in and believe in sustainability, to make sure that that especially now more than ever, we got to make sure everybody knows it's for everybody. The way that we did it, because in many cases, we didn't even have any trees in the neighborhood when I first started, we had to make sure that people understood that there was a direct link between their financial well-being and their personal well-being through the environment. So we started one of the country's first green jobs training and placement systems called the BEST, or Bronx Environmental Stewardship Training, that train folks from our community in the fields of ecological restoration. Everything from urban forestry management to riverfront and waterfront restoration, brownfield remediation. It ran the gamut for all of this stuff. I don't know what happened there, but hello? Oh, but the idea there was that something happened. But the idea there was that you give people both a personal and a financial stake in cleaning up their own environment. They start to see it as something that could impact them. And so we had this great 80% success rate, which was 85% success rate after 3 years, getting people, who many of them had never even had their job before, or in the social welfare system, and who were able to keep those jobs along that route. Now, one of the biggest pains that I've ever had in my entire life, and that I hope we don't repeat this time, is that as a leader in the green jobs movement, I had to watch it from a distance, because I was not included in the discussions about where green jobs could go, under the Obama administration, because I was really convinced that we needed to be looking at climate adaptation versus climate mitigation, because I knew good and daggone well that, frankly, a black man in the White House, and the houses who were not that interested in seeing or supporting him, we were not going to get a climate bill passed that was then supposed to create all of these projects and policies that were going to help create new options for renewable energy at the time. Wasn't going to happen, and of course it didn't happen. And so the green jobs movement kind of fizzled, because no one was thinking about climate adaptation, because it wasn't sexy enough. You need to use whatever you got. You need to look for the holes, because you look where people. The reason why we focus on climate adaptation is because, frankly, we knew no one was watching, and we knew we could get people employed and engaged in those types of fields. And that's why, to this day, sadly, my little program in the South Bronx was one of the biggest and the best that ever happened in this country. That's embarrassing. No, I'm that good. It's not that it was embarrassing. But what I'm saying is that the fact that more people didn't follow my lead, that's what's embarrassing. And we can't continue to do that. And I don't care if it's my lead or something else, because I'm not that focused on this stuff right now. But we need to make sure we're linking it to job creation in ways that meet the needs of people in the local community. And you know what, I'm just gonna skip really far ahead, because I don't know where I am in time, but I wanna get to this real quick, because this is seriously the thing that makes me super excited. And it's this lady, and some of you might know her. I'm sure many of you do. Do you know her? You ever heard of her? Judy Bonds, coal miner's daughter, granddaughter, generations of it, from Whitesville, West Virginia. Yes, the name is Whitesville. And, and we could not have been more different or more of the same. I was from an inner city ghetto. She was from this poor white former coal mining town that actually did support and nurture generations of her family when they would go deep down into the mines to take care, to power America. And this woman, Judy Bonds, I'll never forget when I first went to go visit her. She lived in the hollows, of the mountains and right in the valley, and it was beautiful. If you've ever been to West Virginia, it was a fall, and it was just, the leaves were just starting to turn, and there was just this amazing feel, because there was still flora and fauna all around you down in the hollows, or in the valleys rather. But then she took me around to show me what her people had been going through over the course of the decades since mountaintop removal coal mining had been happening. And so they had these mason jars filled with samples of tap water that would come downstream, from one of those coal mines. That literally, this is tap water, and this one is one of them. I hope you can see it. This is black, that came from nearby. And so what was really interesting about Judy was that, here she was all up in the coal mining, all up in it. That's how it raised her family. She was still living off some of just the residual benefits of it. And then, her little son walked down to the creek one day and literally pulled up dead fish, from this creek. And then she realized, no, there is something wrong. And then she made it her life's mission, to realize what was going on, because that's when they were stripping the top of the mountains off through mountaintop removal coal mining. So it wasn't the same kind of coal mining that her daddy and that her granddaddy did. It just wasn't. And that's when she started educating herself about really what are the costs of mountaintop removal coal mining. And then this was what it was. And so seeing that, also educating herself about what's the possibilities of wind power. Greg talked a little bit about that before, but this was just for the community wind power that they were planning on looking at as well. Like this is an intense number, and I bet right now, because of innovations in wind right now, this number has actually gotten bigger and better. So we know that there is money, in this, but are we really stopping to look at how do we make sure that it's translating to the people who actually need that kind of work? I did walk around the town that was almost exclusively boarded up. It did remind me of the neighborhood that I grew up in 30 years ago, when most of the storefronts were closed, because there wasn't so much of an economy there. Because these are hills that were not too far from where Judy lived that were still up. But this is what a hill would look like once it was gone. So this is there was a mountain there. But there is wind up in those hills that's still there. And so when I met with Judy, and of course this is back when I was an activist, and so what do? You swap t-shirts. And, and I love the back of mine, because, so it says, stop mountaintop removal on the front, but the back of it says, save the endangered hillbilly. Which gets me all sorts of very interesting stares when I wear it in New York City. It's hilarious, and I'm just like, my friend Judy gave me this. You can't tell me not to wear it. But it's all good, because they call themselves hillbillies, because it's like a pride thing. So anyway, but all that to say is, when we stop and think about, are we creating and looking at what are the new possibilities for a new economy? When we have someone in the highest level of government who will eventually, you can't continue to slash and burn without setting up some holes. When we need to look for the holes. We need to hold the line. We need to find ways that really prove to people that we care. We can't keep thinking that just because and it's true, the science is out there. For those of us who aren't science deniers, we know the science is out there. It doesn't matter when people are struggling, when they really feel like they've been left behind by a government or even movements. We have to use this as an opportunity to be better, to remind people, actually possibly for the first time, that we do in fact care, that we care about their quality of life, that we don't just care about being the smartest kids in the room because we happen to be the smartest kids in the room, but that we love with all of our hearts and minds and soul, and that we are going to be helpful and responsible for helping to make an America that is good as its promise. That includes bringing everybody along with us. Black lives matter, hillbilly lives matter, you name it, all of our lives matter. And I don't think we've done such an incredible job, as a group, as collectively as a group of people, especially in the sustainability world. We have such a tremendous opportunity now, and I would say mandate, to make sure that everyone knows that we care, and that we're going to use, not just to talk about the policies because we know we can and we're all really smart, we can do that, but really talk about how do we link with communities that have felt marginalized for a long time and have been. Now, Judy, for those of you who don't know, actually, she also succumbed. She had lung cancer and a couple other kind of cancers, all related to the environment in which she lived. So she never got to see if any of those, community wind power projects that she so desperately wanted to see happen. Couldn't, and I'm not sure if any of them did just yet. But doesn't mean that the numbers aren't out there to help make them happen. It doesn't mean that we can't be pushing super hard to make sure that the VCs and the impact investors are linking directly to produce innovation faster in the renewable energy world so that we can couple job creation where it's needed for the jobs that need to be done. We need to be talking about the economy and the economics of communities that have been left behind, because then we will raise an army. The army that needs to be happening. And the last thing I just want to say is, and I use this slide a lot, because it really speaks to everything, and I feel like every time I get up in the morning and pray, like this is what, because I am a Christian, but I'm also, I do this work in part because of my faith. Because I do feel like I'm supposed to leave the world a little bit better than how I found it. This letter is from Dr. King's letter from a Birmingham jail. And he wrote it, for those of you that don't know, in direct response to a group of white ministers, who wrote an open letter and had it published, to basically tell King to kind of stop on the integration thing. And this is my favorite line from it, because when you are talking about creating, whether it's a just transition or an equitable quality of life or equity in general, then you don't really want the incremental change. You do want to be impatient with what the future can hold. I'm not saying don't be deliberate, don't plan. I'm not saying that, but I am saying, like, what the feeling that we hold in our heart has to be like, we cannot wait until everything is just and better for everybody. I hope, sirs and ladies, that you can understand our legitimate and unavoidable impatience. And I hope that you can all understand that we need you, and you need us, if we're really going to create the kind of change that our world needs to have. Thank you so much.